on behalf of, so welcome everyone. I'm Ben Minter. I'm with the firm of Taylor English. I'm Secretary of the Franchise and Distribution section. And I want to say on behalf of everyone who's the leadership of the section, thank you for being patient. We are delighted to be able to finally have an event. We wanted to have this event at around Christmas time. Unfortunately, that didn't come through. We're here today. We already have an event scheduled for March 23rd. That will be an in-person event, hopefully with a virtual option. And we'll have a panel of federal and state judges who will be speaking to us about franchise issues. So again, mark your calendar for the afternoon of March 23rd, and we are already working on events to follow up on that. So the ball is rolling on this. And for today, we're here to talk about a topic that probably most of you don't know too much about. We have three expert speakers here to speak with us about it. We have Eden Doniger, who is the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer for BitPay, which is based here in Atlanta. I see Eden now on the screen here. Hi, Eden. We also have with us two attorneys from Founders Legal. Founders Legal is a firm that focuses on technology companies, innovative companies, and the attorneys here with us are Yuri Elizer, patent attorney, who's the head of the intellectual property group at that firm, and I think a founding partner, I believe, of Founders Legal, and also Stan Sater, who is a technology attorney, counsels businesses in this space and speaks to different groups about this technology and the legal implications of it. And Stan, I think you actually were speaking to UGA, on Monday? You were speaking to some UGA students?
Yeah, yesterday, guest lecture, the UGA law course.
And were they all still kind of drunk and high off the national championship? Did any of them pay attention, or were they still just spaced out?
No, they were all law students, so they were pretty focused and attentive.
Okay. Well, so the format of today is going to be a little bit different than normal. I'll be asking a lot of stupid questions of our very smart panelists. But to set the mood, I wanted to start and play a video for all of you that hopefully gives us a beginning crash course on the technology.
Well, luckily, I saw this commercial last night that explains what Bitcoin is and how it works. Take a look.
Gin.
Oh. I love our little get-togethers.
Well, you know what I don't love?
What?
Not knowing where to put my money for retirement.
There are just too many options.
401ks, IRAs, savings.
It's so confusing.
Well, you know where I put my money?
Where?
Bitcoin.
What's Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital cryptocurrency that works without a central bank.
Well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and it's so simple to use. Transactions take place through the use of cryptography and are verified by network nodes and recorded in an immutable public distributed ledger called a blockchain. What could be simpler than that?
Nothing. It sounds great.
Right. So is it like investing in stocks?
Kind of, but not at all.
Well, I'm on board.
Really? Because I have so many more questions.
Not me.
Where can I get one of these Bitcoins? Can I buy one at my local bank?
Of course not. What a dumb question.
Thought it was valid.
No, it was dumb.
Bitcoins aren't like regular currency. They're mined.
In a physical mine, like gold?
That's ridiculous. Bitcoins are mined on computers using the SHA-256 hashing algorithm, creating 12.5 Bitcoins per block.
Uh-huh.
That is until mid-2020.
Uh-huh.
And then afterwards, 6.25 Bitcoins per block for 4 years until the next halving.
Wait, are we still talking about money?
Cryptocurrency.
This sounds so simple.
Shut up, Margaret. There's no way you understood all of that.
Okay.
So how much do one of these Bitcoins cost?
$17,000.
$17,000? That's insane.
Sounds like a bargain.
Ugh. And how do you keep track of these things' values?
Just check the internet. So far today, its value has gone up $1,000. Oh, and now it's down $800, and now it's up $500.
Sounds like you can't lose.
You absolutely can, Margaret.
How do I buy Bitcoins?
It's easy. Just go online and give them your credit card number.
Give who your credit card number?
Bitcoin, and then let the internet do what it does.
What does it do exactly?
It Bitcoins.
Here's my credit card.
No! So who started Bitcoin?
We think it was Satoshi Nakamoto.
Who is that?
No one really knows.
He sounds cute.
Margaret, I swear to God.
And Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency I trust with my kids' college fund.
That's smart investing.
That's bat crazy.
Oh, now it's down to $3. Easy come, easy go.
This message brought to you by the stock market. Gamble with your retirement the old-fashioned way.
All right, so we've learned everything we need to know. Well, to make this a little bit relevant to all of us that are in the franchise and distribution area, we've got a scenario to get us started. Let's see. All right, so many of you probably are familiar with the name Odell Beckham. What you may not know is that Odell, like many mayors in New York and Miami, has now decided he's going to start taking his salary in Bitcoin.
It's the start of a new era, and I'm looking forward to the future. That's why I'm taking my new salary in Bitcoin, thanks to Cash App. To all my fans out there, no matter where you are, I want to say thank you. I'm giving back a total $1 million worth of Bitcoin to celebrate you.
All right, so, there he goes. So imagine then that in the future, Odell Beckham has retired. He is interested in becoming a franchisee. He wants to acquire some units for Royal and Gold sandwiches, have different shops in maybe New York. And the only issue is Odell doesn't have cash, he only has Bitcoin. And he's only interested in paying his franchise fees in Bitcoin. Well, what might you do? If you're approached by your client about this matter, first thing you might say is, well, what is Bitcoin? Well, to learn what Bitcoin is, you've got to learn what a cryptocurrency is. Well, to learn what a cryptocurrency is, you might have to learn what a blockchain is. So I understand if you could tell us, maybe walk us through, what is blockchain?
Yeah, so blockchain is basically a distributed ledger of transactions. When we think about blockchain networks, at the core, what it really is a group of connected computers reaching agreement on shared data. With respect to blockchains, that shared data are transactions of different assets. In the case of Bitcoin, it's transactions of Bitcoin. So really, it's any computer that's running a certain software is constantly being updated and reaching agreement on the different transactions that are taking place. And through cryptography, as more transactions take place and as they're connected in chronological order, you can constantly go back and look at the previous history of transactions and be sure that all transactions taking place today are verified and according to the rules of the network.
So, this slide, it kind of lays out that maybe there's some core elements of it. Is this accurate then? It's about, you've got blocks, you've got cryptography, and the fact that it's distributed ledger. Is there something missing on that, or is there?
So all the transactions are bundled into blocks that then are chained together in chronological order. And then, in certain blockchains, there's the consensus mechanism for Bitcoin's proof of work. And that's how everyone comes to agreement over the state of the ledger.
And why blocks? Why not just a chain of all the transactions? Why do they all have to be grouped together in a block?
Well, so it's one of the trade-offs, right? So block is really just the data structure. And so it gives everyone an opportunity to verify the transactions that are going into the blocks, to sort of stop and verify all the transactions are proper. Because otherwise, if you're just allowing every transaction to go through, you can't really stop to verify each transaction before they're appended onto this immutable chain of transactions.
So the whole thing wouldn't really work unless they were put in blocks. Is that kind of the point?
Yeah, because when you take away that data structure, what you introduce into the system is the reliance on more trust. And through that, in the traditional sense, that trust is placed in an institution like a Wells Fargo, where you are relying on them to maintain the state of the ledger of transactions.
So if we were to dumb this down as much as we could, then is this an accurate statement then, that it's basically, it's all, first and foremost, it's a ledger?
Yeah.
Okay. And that ledger, it says here, that's unchangeable. Data can be added but not removed. So is there a potential for an error in the chain or in the ledger? And how would that get corrected?
So really, yeah, if there is an error, I guess you have to define what is an error, right? If the transaction abides by the rules of the network, then it's not really an error. But a lot of people may make errors in the sense of who they transact with. But the fact that every computer has this copy of the ledger means that it's constantly being updated, and transactions aren't easily able to be removed or reversed.
But and maybe this is if you think this is a bad time to ask this question, but what is, I mean, it can be kind of changed in a way, right? Isn't there this thing called a fork?
So fork is just, it's a split where they create a new blockchain network that has different rules than the other network. So they're creating an entirely new chain.
So you're never able to change it, but maybe you can go back and branch off and start a new, branch off the chain, and then if everyone agrees, that becomes the ledger, right?
Right. So this kind of happened with Ethereum. They experienced a hack a few years ago, and based on how they chose to address that hack of certain unauthorized transactions, what happened was the Ethereum split. And so now we have two Ethereum chains, Ethereum ETH and Ethereum Classic ETC. So they didn't reverse the transactions, but they split the chains.
So if let's say I'm over my head here, and then I'm thinking, well, I'm just trying to conceive of this in a way that I might be able to explain to someone else. Is this, there's this scenario, or not a scenario, but there's a description here of, maybe it's a bunch of radio ham operators that are all connected or on the same frequency. Is there an example that you often use when talking to a non-computer scientist like me, or maybe Yuri, or even if there's an often way you conceptualize this for people? Or is there no way to simplify it?
No, there definitely is. Even I'm not sure if you have another way.
I don't necessarily have another way. I'm not a highly technical person, and it has taken me time to understand all this. So I would say, first of all, it doesn't immediately make sense to someone who isn't a technologist or a computer scientist. That's normal. I do understand it now, now that I've been working at a crypto company for a while. But I do like this analogy. I mean, I think if you just think about it as a lot of independent verifiers working together to confirm that something is true and accurate and real before it is declared so. And then once that's done, and that becomes the record, right? So if you think about like in traditional terms, how would that work? You'd have to have many witnesses to a transaction seeing the same thing at the same time, and everyone agrees, yes, this is what happened. That's what the computers are doing by solving these really complicated equations all at the same time. As far as this question of forks and changes, I think that's an interesting kind of really technical concept. I think that with forks, it's really a different thing altogether. And I think, Stan, you did a good job explaining it, but it's where a group of people come to a consensus that there is a different way they'd like to do that from the original blockchain that they're working off of. So they agree to make that change. And there you go, you have a new blockchain that has a lot of similar features maybe to the one it forked from. And you can have hard forks and soft forks, and sometimes the original chain stays and sometimes it doesn't. And there's a lot of different things that can happen there. But to me, that has nothing to do with the nature of this concept of an immutable distributed ledger with multiple computers confirming transactions and making sure that they are accurate and secure.
You guys hear me? Okay, there we go. I'm sorry, I think my mic was. Eden, thank you, and Stan, thank you both for that explanation. I'll try to dumb it down as well. In basic terms, a blockchain, I would perceive each block as a series of transactions, movement of a certain amount of, let's say, Bitcoin from one location to another location. Those are called wallets, and each of that, we'll call those transactions. And the blockchain can say, all right, within 10 to maybe 20 minutes, each miner on the blockchain network can compile a certain amount of transactions and try to solve a complex algorithm for that set of transactions. And once they solve this complex algorithm, if they're the first ones to solve it, they're given a reward. All the other miners will verify that that's the right solution, and that batch of transactions gets placed as a block on a blockchain, such that the next block, in the next period of time, say 10 to 20 minutes, the miners try again. This time, the equation they're solving includes the data from the previous block within the new block, so that they're sure that these new transactions not only are verified, but they are also in line with the entire chain. So that new block that will be proposed to be added can't be based on data that is not the same in every other miner's record as well. Well, Ben, I think this would be funny looking back on this video 5 years from now, even 10 years from now. We will be laughing at ourselves at these explanations. At least I know I will be. And with regards to a fork, where I see, Eden, what Ben was saying is that what can happen is maybe there's a bad actor. Someone stole a lot of Bitcoin in a transaction, or a lot of ETH in a transaction. If you get enough consensus, each of those miners can say, all right, you know what? We're going to pretend that block where the theft occurred, we're going to pretend it didn't happen, and we're going to reset on a prior block where we know everyone was happy before the theft occurred, and fork on a new chain. So that's where I see forks to correct bad actors taking place. Although that's quite a feat to get all those miners in the world to agree to fork. I don't know if that could be pulled off easily. It seems like you'd have a lot of centralization there.
Well, and that's an interesting point when you say centralization, because everything y'all have talked about, in this example of all these different people, no one's really in charge. They're all in charge together. So is a blockchain if it's not like this distributed? Can a blockchain be operated by a central authority? Can a company have its own blockchain?
I believe that it could. It's absolutely possible. And I think that the decentralization is something that the blockchain enables, meaning it's not a firm requirement, but if enough people decide to join the blockchain network and be a miner on that network, then you can achieve decentralization. But you could have an in-house blockchain as well.
One thing to add, just for clarification too, is that not that this is a critical point really, but just forks don't only occur because there was some threat or an attack or some negative reason. Forks can occur because the developers around the world that work on these things think there's a better way. There might be something they think is inefficient or too expensive or too slow around a particular chain, and they think they can solve for that. So that's often the reason why you'll see like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and other forks. That's often the motivation too. And there might be disagreement in the community over how to solve that, and that's often why you'll have the group that thinks there's a better way. Well, they'll go create the fork.
So let's see, there we go. All right, so we said that we had to learn about blockchain in order to learn about what a cryptocurrency is, in order to learn about what Bitcoin specifically is. So extrapolating from what you've told me about blockchain technology, then what's a cryptocurrency?
I think we'll talk later about the distinction between cryptocurrencies and digital assets. But kind of when I think about what is a cryptocurrency, I think it's a digital asset that's native to blockchains, and that it runs on top of a permissionless network. So anyone can read, write, and verify transactions on that network. And what I mean by that is anyone can conduct a transaction, anyone can verify the state of the transactions, and anyone can read the ledger. That's not the case with a lot of private blockchains. With a lot of private blockchains, it's not open to the public. So that's a key distinction. The network itself that the cryptocurrency runs on is trust minimized. So it's built on game theory, where it's very difficult and almost impossible to try and game the system to benefit in some way that's outside the predetermined and agreed rules for conducting transactions on the network. The network itself is also censorship resistant. So there's not one centralized entity or being that can block anyone from transacting on the network. And most importantly as well, a cryptocurrency is its own asset. It's not tied to anything other than itself. It's not a derivative of anything. It's a bearer instrument, and its value is derived from market forces, from supply, demand, and different programmatic scarcity.
What you just said, does that maybe touch on what's the difference between a token and a coin or a cryptocurrency? And because you said derivatization, and I've heard about tokens and how tokenization, how people can tokenize things. Am I on the right track with that? Or?
So I think tokens pretty general. I think it depends on what it is and what that token represents. I know in the space there's a lot of people wanting to create tokens that represent some real world assets. In my mind, that's a digital asset rather than a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, where it's purely digital. The whole state of transactions with respect to Bitcoin has only ever occurred on the Bitcoin network.
So if I could chime in there as well.
Yeah, please.
What I would say is cryptocurrency versus a token, in my view, is that a token contains along with it usually certain functions, features, or rights to the token holder. Stan might correct me here, but a cryptocurrency is no such thing. A cryptocurrency is a representation, a digital representation of something that's probably has no function other than to convey some sort of value, a monetary or currency value. And all you can do is hold it or transfer it from one wallet to the other wallet. Whereas now you can add in tokens, you could have voting rights along with those tokens. They could be used as utility keys in order to execute certain functions. But I generally see a cryptocurrency as just like, a conveyor of value with no utility behind it, no functionality behind it.
Well, I do want to get into what Bitcoin is specifically, but I think I want to skip ahead and ask a question about, because this was already intimated by you, Stan, So what's the difference between a cryptocurrency and a digital currency? I mean, the Fed there's been a lot of talk about digital dollar, and I know that there's digital yuan that's going to be offered soon if it's not already.
So I think the key difference is it's where you put the trust and who is the issuer. You know, with digital currencies, it's sort of a format change, if you will, for normal dollars that we have today and the digital dollars that we have today. Whereas a cryptocurrency is something entirely new, where the trust that you're placing is more so in the network and not on a central bank that can then manipulate the supply of the underlying cryptocurrency. You know, kind of what Eden was saying about forks, you know, being changed because potentially there's a different way to do something. You know, one of those different ways to do something is to increase the supply of the underlying cryptocurrency or increase the block size or something like that. But again, the community has to agree on that. Whereas when we look at certain digital currencies, it's no better than the digital currency that we have today that's not tied to a blockchain, in my mind.
Eden, I've heard that I thought I had read that maybe governments were more interested in stable coins than necessarily in cryptocurrency and what they wanted to regulate. Is that accurate? What's the heavy hand of government more interested in right now? Is it looking at the cryptocurrencies? We don't want a competitor for our dollar, or is it, well, we're concerned about this digital kind of currency that's kind of based off an existing asset of some kind?
I think it's both. I mean, I think there's concern from the government and our various regulators all around on all of that. I know that the President Biden working group and this sort of interagency Fed, OCC, FDIC projects that are going on, a huge area of focus for them is stable coins. And you've had pronouncements from various lawmakers who think that really we should have it be that only banks can issue stable coins rather than private companies being able to, because you've had some issues with some companies who, you know, can claim that their stable coin is tied one-to-one to the US dollar, but then when you get under the hood, there might not be great evidence of that. And how do you regulate and control that and prevent either fraud or outsized risk for consumers who don't understand that when it's not backed by insurance or any kind of banking product? So I think that's why there's a lot of focus on stable coins in general, but there's also just a huge debate about CBDCs. And first of all, you know, what's the motivation there? Are we trying to just kind of overtake cryptocurrencies with this other product that really isn't, like we just said, a cryptocurrency? And there's a lot of different views on that right now. There's no consensus on it. If you look at some of the countries like China and others that are basically trying to essentially ban cryptos and replace them with a mandatory CBDC product, you're really defeating the whole purpose of what this technology offers and why it's popular and desirable and all of the potential it has. So I think there's a true conflict here that all governments are trying to look at right now. There's a wide spectrum of solutions. Do you ban it? Do you make it as your own CBDC that seems to kind of replace it? Do you regulate it and allow it, which is where our country is limping towards, right? We still have a lot of work to do to get there. But I think the voices that think that cryptocurrency is just a bad thing in our country are seemingly overshadowed by the voices that think it is exciting, innovative technology that just needs to be regulated in a smart and effective way. And the stable coin argument kind of gets in the middle of that and confuses matters a little bit because it's sort of a hybrid, right? It's tied to the US dollar, so it's not quite an independent cryptocurrency. It seemingly carries some more safety and security and less volatility, which can be appealing, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily completely safe and secure, as we've seen. So there's a lot.
So a stable coin is just something that's tied to something supposedly stable, some other asset. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And it's a popular way to transfer money, right? Because if you're you don't want to deal with volatility of, say, Bitcoin, you can instead use one of the leading stable coins as your means of transfer and get that one-to-one equivalent that day, and then transfer that into dollars if you want to.
Would I be incorrect to say that a digital currency does not necessarily require any blockchain-based solution at all? It's just I feel like we've got digital currency all the time. We've got more digital dollars than we have actual dollars in circulation, I would imagine. And what makes a cryptocurrency is the term, I believe, is the cryptography of it all, which implies that a batch of transactions, the entire ledger, all history of all transactions ever on Bitcoin, can be solved by processing an algorithm that will spit out a long answer in a single string form. That's cryptography. It gets encrypted that way. And so it ensures, all the benefits of the blockchain when it's decentralized, whereas a digital currency, it's none of that. You don't get any of the benefits of the blockchain there. So what a stable coin does is says, we'll remove the volatility of, the value here, that the speculative value of how much is one coin worth. We'll peg it to the fiat, the US dollar, but you'll still get all the benefits of the blockchain along with it.
To keep us moving on, because we do have to get to a lot in a short bit of time, I want to go back just for a second. Is Bitcoin then a stable coin, or is it a true cryptocurrency?
It's a true cryptocurrency.
And what else makes Bitcoin special? I mean, is it
the first one? Right? For all the things that we, have been discussing, the Bitcoin blockchain is very resilient. Bitcoin as an asset, lowercase b, is the native digital asset to the Bitcoin blockchain. Its value is derived that there are from the programmatic scarcity. There will only be 21 million Bitcoin. The price is determined by supply and demand. As far as we know, the Bitcoin network is censorship resistant. Anyone can make a Bitcoin transaction. There's, as long as it's valid and abides by the rules of the network. And anyone can run the Bitcoin blockchain, for $100 and the creation of a little Raspberry Pi. You can run a Bitcoin node in your house and verify the Bitcoin blockchain.
So, because I only learned this recently, a Raspberry Pi is it's like a basic computer.
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon, just some computing chips, and put it together, plug it in, and go download some software. But so anyone, the barrier to running the Bitcoin network is almost zero. There's no barriers. So I think that's what's different than, say, the digital currency. We have no idea what the Fed is doing in terms of the balance sheet. And certain stable coins, I think that's the difference with certain stable coins. We can't really monitor certain stable coins. As Eden was saying, when you peel back the layer, it's not necessarily backed one-to-one with US dollars in the bank account.
So I know that El Salvador then was announcing they were going to do Bitcoin as legal tender. Is that working out for them so far? Or they're like allowing you to go to your bank, I guess, for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think a lot of from the videos I've been seeing, there's a lot of people transacting in it at normal stores and using it for its intended purpose.
I think there's questions and concerns about how they rolled it out so quickly and what the risks are. And I think just the other day, the IMF, someone from the IMF came out with a pretty harsh statement and concerns about that El Salvador should pull it back. I think it's too early to say, has it been successful as an overall statement? I do agree with Stan for sure that, you see widespread adoption when any kind of move like this is made. But the jury's not out on how that's going for them as sort of a national strategy, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's the good clarification, right? From on the ground standpoint, it's usable and people are using it at a high level standpoint, whether, creating sovereign bonds, to buy more Bitcoin, whether that's a better strategy or the fact that Moody's downgraded their creditability, whether that's a good long-term strategy, we don't know.
Exactly. What you see in a lot of countries that are not Western countries that are so credit-based, the average people are really interested in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as a means of earning money, saving money, spending money. This is something that's much more widely understood and adopted even in lower income communities than it is in our country. That's an interesting trend to watch.
So this prompts me to think about, well, maybe this is of interest to someone who's like an international franchisor. But going back to our franchise example, where we've got Odell Beckham who wants to buy some franchises. I mean, maybe as a franchise attorney, he's now learned about blockchain and now learned a little bit about cryptocurrency, and you're thinking, well, what kind of regulations do I need to worry about? Is this a security? Is this a commodity? What do I have to be on guard about? Could you kind of address that, Eden? Like if I want to start engaging in my system to start allowing at a broad level payments, not just a franchise fee, but maybe of royalties on an ongoing basis, Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. Like how much trouble am I going to get myself into?
Yeah. Well, at this point in time, it's fairly agreed upon and settled, although things could always change that. For example, Bitcoin is a commodity, not a security. The Ripple example that you had on the last page, which Ripple is a company that created XRP, which is a fairly popular cryptocurrency that has a lot of interesting features to it. They're tied up in an SEC litigation because they weren't able to avoid it. And that's a really fascinating case, how that's going to land. But it has a lot of complexity to it. It's not just about the actual XRP itself, but also how it was treated by the founders of the company for a certain number of years, and then how it's used today are very different things. So I think what we'll see come out of that will be very instructive for the future, because the legal analysis is based on really old, classic securities case law that doesn't necessarily apply on all fours to these kinds of analyses. So as far as like putting aside XRP, I think, I guess I'll explain that the company I work for, BitPay, we are the world's kind of leading payment processor of cryptocurrency payments. So think of us as like a PayPal type solution that merchants and businesses can easily use to accept cryptocurrency payments from their customers for a variety of reasons, goods and services, et cetera. And you see like the cryptos we accept, there's about a dozen there. I know all those symbols don't mean anything to some people, but there's Bitcoin and Ethereum are in there. XRP was one of them. It's on hold until this SEC lawsuit gets resolved in the United States. But
I have to ask Eden, is that dog, is it Dogecoin or is it Doggy Coin? I've never known.
That's Dogecoin, which is a funny example of a coin that was created as sort of a joke, but then over time gained real popularity and has a huge following called like the Doge Army, and they love it and they want it to be an accepted form of payment in a lot of places. And you have people like Mark Cuban of the Dallas Mavericks being a champion of it and helping get attention to it, and Elon Musk. And this is how these things sort of come into reality. So we launched Dogecoin about a year ago. And then we have a variety of the leading stable coins. But the point being is we think about things like, is this cryptocurrency under scrutiny by any regulator? That might be a concern of what its status is. Fine, we're going to look at that for sure. So that's where the XRP example comes in. But also, what's its market cap? What are the other risks around that cryptocurrency? There's tons more cryptocurrencies out there, but you saw only about 12 on our list. And that's because we're very careful and thoughtful about which ones have value and what their risk is and why we would even want to offer them. And part of that is also from a compliance standpoint. I see you put the slide up of a sort of what are the components of a compliance program for a crypto company. There's a lot that goes into that. A lot of what you're seeing on the screen would be applicable to any financial institution. This is not really unique to a cryptocurrency company by any means. We're not a bank, we're a financial institution. We're called a money services business. So think of things like Western Union, things like that. We help transfer money basically, but in this sense, cryptocurrency. So we accept the crypto in from the payor, we do an exchange of that in the background, and we settle to our customers, the business, in either the fiat of their choice, like dollars or pounds or whatever, or even in cryptocurrency. Some of them like to be settled in cryptocurrency, but we have to have a full comprehensive compliance program built around that. And that question you asked about, is it a security, is it a commodity, whatever, what are the risks there? Most of the time when you're looking at payments, using crypto for payments, which is a core part of this presentation today, really you're not taking on extra risk there. You know, BitPay is the one that's taking on potential risk. And we've mitigated that risk in how we choose the cryptos we accept and how we do our entire compliance program. I will say, at this time, a company like ours, a payment processor, we're not subject to any particular licensing requirement. We're not subject to the SEC. We're not subject to a lot of other agencies. We are registered with the US Department of the Treasury's Financial Enforcement Crimes Network, FinCEN, which is Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is a requirement of any money services business. And that gives us a whole bunch of compliance obligations that we have to comply with. And we also have licenses as a money transmitter in a lot of states in the United States. Because we're an MSB, depending on how that state views what we do, we may have to have a license in that state under their money transmissions program, which makes us subject to that state's regulations as well. And that's a complicated area that any company would have to look at. But if you're a company that just wants to receive payments and you work with a company like BitPay to do it, you're relying on BitPay's money transmitter licenses in order to accept those payments. So that's part of what's really neat about this is you're not, you get a third party in the middle that has all of the licensing and compliance requirements taken care of, like BitPay, then you're okay. You're literally just adding a payment option on your checkout screen. Or if you don't have a checkout screen, maybe you use this for email billing, whatever. Let's say you're a law firm or an accounting firm and you want to accept payments in crypto from some of your clients. You're not going to have a checkout button on your website, but you will want to issue an invoice and get paid in crypto. That's the kind of solutions we provide.
So I always hear that anti-money laundering is a term that gets bandied about when I hear about cryptocurrencies and regulation a lot. And I wonder if, obviously you'd have this slide here about the AML program interview. I mean, is this the big concern of the government's near, that people are, they're evading their taxes by engaging in crypto?
Yeah, it is. If you actually go back, if you would, to that other slide, I think that gives you a better view into, it's not just anti-money laundering. That's a huge part of it, right? And anti-terrorist financing. And so you have to have a whole program built as the payment processor, as the money transmitter, you have to have a whole program around that. Then you also, and part of that is the USA Patriot Act and identifying your customers and making sure that you know your customer. There's also OFAC, which Office of Foreign Assets Control, the sanctions program in our country, is applicable to any business in the United States. You cannot deal with businesses or people who are located in particular comprehensively sanctioned countries, which are Iran, North Korea, Cuba, and it used to be Sudan, no longer comprehensively sanctioned, and Syria, and then the Crimean region. But, and you have to make sure you don't do business with any people, regardless of where they're located, who are on OFAC's specially designated nationals list, which is like bad folks who have been put on that list. You can't do business with them. OFAC focuses more on financial institutions, making sure that they have a compliance program and controls in place to do this successfully. So if you're a company that wants to accept crypto payments or any payment, you need to make sure that you're working with a vendor to accept those payments that has these kinds of program components in place, right? It doesn't matter if it's crypto or not. But I think there's a there is a sort of expectation in some people's minds that crypto payments are more susceptible to criminal behavior because we see things like these ransomware attacks on the rise using crypto payments, and ransomware actors using crypto exchanges around the world as a means to launder their ransomware collections. And that is a real concern. And it just points back to the idea of how do you monitor those transactions? How do you control for that? And there's vendors and systems and tools now that are fantastic. We use one of them, and we have people on our team who monitor transactions all day long to look for those kinds of risks and threats and then report them to the government as required. So all of that risk that we talk about, all the stuff that goes in like transaction monitoring program, you're looking for exposure to different kinds of risks like money laundering or sanctions program issues, suspicious activity in general, right? The payment processor that your client uses should be able to show that they're really good at this, that they have a program in place and that they do this and that they get examined and audited and have all the appropriate licenses. And so when we're pitching our business to potential customers, they're looking at all this as part of their vetting of us. And that is on the rise. Like I'd say 2 years ago, a lot of our customers didn't really ask us about this stuff. We were doing it, but they didn't really ask. And now I think because there's so much more crypto adoption and so many bigger enterprise type companies are interested in crypto payments now and crypto solutions, they have their legal teams and their business people heavily focused on all this stuff to make sure that they can feel comfortable going forward with the provider.
Since we're getting a little short on time, I wanted to kind of look back at this from the standpoint of, you've answered very well for us, Eden, some of these questions we might have about regulation, which is, okay, well, you can get a payment processor that can handle, I can offshore a lot of that risk. Or not offshore, but I can have someone else deal with that. Maybe if you're more of a litigation attorney, you might be thinking about, well, what does this look like in a case? And we've got a case citation here to a Northern District case. I think it was Judge Totenberg maybe that gave the opinion in this BDI Capital case. In a few minutes, could you kind of sum maybe that up or address that, Stan, just so we kind of understand what does it look like when cryptocurrency is at the heart of a lawsuit?
Yeah, so this was actually an interesting case from a couple of years ago now, where it dealt with a customer of an exchange. There was a fork of the Bitcoin network, and I think it was Bitcoin Gold. That was the question. So when there was a fork of the Bitcoin network and the creation of Bitcoin Gold, if you held Bitcoin, then you were to get a certain amount of Bitcoin Gold. This person had left their Bitcoin on the exchange. So they left their Bitcoin custodied with the exchange. And the
exchange, happened, what, like Coinbase or like something like that?
Yeah.
They're holding an account for you?
Yeah, they were holding an account. It was the bull that was holding the account, and that's where the Bitcoin was being custodied. And this person said, I want my Bitcoin Gold. And so the interesting thing about this case was that it was a case for conversion, because they were claiming that the exchange had converted, improperly withholding their Bitcoin Gold. And so the judge, though, actually in the opinion, went down, a deep understanding of how cryptocurrency works, the options that people have with respect to exchanges, the fact that people can self-custody their Bitcoin. They don't have to rely on centralized institutions to maintain their Bitcoin. And in fact, the ruling actually came out that it isn't an exchange's obligation to support every cryptocurrency that ever exists, and that includes forks, and that the individual user can custody Bitcoin themselves, and they can do what is necessary to claim the assets that they may or may not have from various forks. But it'd be too much of a burden for the exchange to comply with simply because they run Bitcoin. it'd be too much of a burden to say then that they have to also run every fork of the Bitcoin network. And so, that was just an interesting case where the judge really dove in and examined the issue from kind of a first principles perspective to get to this conclusion that I personally think is the right conclusion. Certainly, go ahead.
Is the takeaway from this then that maybe if someone's engaging in cryptocurrency and they have their crypto held in an exchange, maybe the exchange has the account that's actually holding it, then that they need to be watchful?
Yeah, they need to ask those kind of diligence questions when it comes to security of the custodying of their assets. What is the exchange's obligations with respect to lost, stolen assets, and those are the risks they need to be cognizant of when they use some of those centralized institutions like an exchange. And what do they need to think about in terms of storing their own assets, whether it's on a software wallet or a hardware wallet or some wallet that they control that no other institution has control of.
So one question that I thought might be really, maybe a lot of people have, I would have, was this last question on this slide. So what is a potential for, like, we talked about where forking could happen because some bad actor somehow was able to maybe steal someone's key and steal some Bitcoin, and that can be negated by creating a fork or something. But might a franchisor have any kind of liability is there a scenario where you need to be worried about a fraudulent transaction and being liable for that? I don't know if you can conceptualize like a real world example. How might this play out? Or is it not really, because of the technology, it's not something you'd have to worry about?
I mean, I'll just jump in and say one thing. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Nina.
Just interesting, like as a payment processor, we care a lot about that. And we think a lot about risk mitigation and fraud scenarios where someone could try to manipulate the process behind how transactions are confirmed on the blockchain and how much time that takes, and how they could try to commit what's called double spend fraud, which is, I won't get into, we don't have time to get into like the technical details, but it's a form of fraud that could be committed. And we have all kinds of mitigation in place and alerts to look for that and to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think part of what you do is, as a business, you look to see if you're using a payment processor for something like this, what is their risk mitigation and what will happen if there's a fraudulent transaction? And how do you deal with refunds, right? Refunds of blockchain payments is a whole interesting area that we've had to, at BitPay, we've had to come up with a solution for that works and makes sense, and with a customer support team that can handle it. So, these are complicated scenarios that are very technology based, that aren't the same as you would think of a refund if you walk into a store and you say, I want to give this item back and here's my receipt. It's pretty different. So it's just stuff to learn about and think about, but I will just answer the question to say, a good company that's good at this and knows how to do this will have controls and contractual terms that talk about all of these kinds of situations.
I'm going to skip this question about kind of business kind of questions people might have, but Yuri, I would like to, in our remaining time, I think one thing that might be of particular interest to people that deal with supply networks is this thing of smart contracts. And going back to our scenario, what if our franchisor wants to start? Is there a use application for smart contracts? Which, I mean, that's an application of blockchain technology, right?
Yes, it is. And Ben, I would believe that smart contracts have a huge role to play. I'm a big fan of smart contracts. And what I particularly like about smart contracts is that they eliminate the requirement, generally speaking, of a human actor or trusting a human actor to move money. Ultimately, that's what I would see the best use case is when you have money that's supposed to be shared by more than one person, you would require in the traditional sense that one person actually moves the money as they promise to do so, as they are contractually obligated to do so. And so if you have franchisees, for instance, that are required to pay you 15% or 20% of whatever they make, if you use a smart contract in a cryptocurrency system on a blockchain network, you would be able to have transparency, and not only transparency, but built-in computer executable instructions that will necessarily move money in accordance to however it was programmed to and agreed upon. So I believe smart contracts would play a large role in the future of cryptocurrencies.
And then you had a slide here of like an example of maybe a smart contract. Could you maybe walk through that before we close?
Yeah, of course. So the most basic example of what I'm referring to, I would say, is an escrow account, because we're all familiar with escrow accounts. You put money, you give it in trust to a third party, and that third party will decide when the conditions have been met to move the money one way or another. Both parties have assurances that way. In a smart contract system, you could fund a wallet that's controlled by a smart contract. Both parties say put some money in, and then you establish rules. And the rules can be as simple as votes. Whenever majority of 3 votes is received in favor of moving money in one direction, execute that transaction. And so now you know that in a democratic way, you trust that this entity, this programmed actor, will move the money or the assets as instructed. And it doesn't have to be money. It could be any digital assets stored on a blockchain that has smart contract capability.
Thank you, Yuri. I'm afraid we are out of time. So hopefully, though, the slideshow itself has a lot of links, thanks to the good work of our presenters. And so I hope that all of you have what you need to do some follow-up kind of research on all these topics. And I want to close here. Any of you can go to Coindesk.com or Coinbase.com and see the current prices of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. And you'll recall in our opening video, I think what Bitcoin at that time was 17,000, and now it's what, 38. Maybe it's dropped down to 37 today. I don't know about y'all. Wait, I'm sorry, Yuri.
When we were planning the CLE, it was almost double that, but
Yeah. Well, right, but I mean, gosh, I don't know about y'all. I really wish I had some Bitcoin 5 years ago that I'd held on to. And then for everyone who's participating today, there are some interesting links here that just sort of help visualize the activity in not just Bitcoin, but the cryptocurrency network. The first link here kind of shows you transactions as giant balls falling one at a time. The second link kind of takes you around the globe real time as transactions are happening. So I encourage all of you to go check on that when you're finishing your lunch, if you haven't already. And I just want to say a special thank you to our presenters today. Thank you very much to Yuri and to Stan. You have their email addresses here. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions. As I've said, Founders Legal has been a big sponsor of people in this technology and businesses in this technology in Atlanta. And of course, BitPay is headquartered in Atlanta. Is it also headquartered in the Netherlands, Eden? Or
we're headquartered in Alpharetta in the Avalon area. We have our European office in the Netherlands.
Yeah. So thank you to the 3 of you. Of course, my name's Ben Minner. I'm with Taylor English and Franchise Group. But thank you for your time today. And for everyone else, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And I hope you're now inspired to go engage in a cryptocurrency transaction.
Thank you, Ben, and to our speakers. This is Annie Kayola. I'm chiming in here at the end to thank Ben and our speakers. And I also want to just make one kind of quick announcement about our upcoming CLE that Ben mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, which is a judicial panel that we're having on March 23rd from 3 to 5 p.m. The panel discussion is generally going to be about franchise litigation and enforcing franchise rights in kind of this post-COVID world that we live in. And I would like to ask anyone who has questions that you would like to pose to the judges to please email them to me. I'm in the process of compiling a list of questions that we're going to present to the judges. So if you have any sort of burning questions about what would a judge do in this scenario, or this is something that has sort of been on your mind that you'd like to know a judge's perspective on, please email me with your questions. It's Annie@kaolarose.com. I'm on the franchise website and all that if you need my contact information, but welcome y'all's input so that we can incorporate your questions and thoughts at the next CLE. And thank you again to all of our speakers. This was excellent. Fascinating. I learned a ton. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
This concludes today's meeting. Thank you for joining and have a great afternoon.